Hello, my name is Autumn Brown, and I'm a researcher with Oklahoma State's Oklahoma Oral History Research Project for our Activism and Education and the Civil Rights Movement Oral History Project. Today, February 7, 2020, I am meeting with Charlene Factory to discuss her experiences with school desegregation in Oklahoma City. Ms. Factory, thank you so much for talking with me today. Let's begin by telling me a little bit about yourself. Where were you born? Tell me a little bit about your family.
Okay, I was born in Lawton, Oklahoma. I was raised in Chickasha, Oklahoma. My early years were my brother and I lived with my grandmother, affectionately known as Big Mama, and we stayed with her. It was when Mama started working at Langston that we went to stay with her uh, while she was commuting back and forth. And we went to Lincoln School, which was an all-black school, grades 1 through 12. There was no kindergarten at that particular time. And it was, to me, it was a wonderful childhood. It was just fun and playing and outside. And as I think back now, how free children were to play outside, not worrying about being kidnapped or being molested or anything like that. Um, it is just then you understand how great your childhood was and the freedoms that you had. My family consisted of my brother, myself, mom and daddy, our immediate family, and of course we were a very close family. My grandmother had an uncle Lemuel, and there were three of my mother had two living siblings. Her sister Helen Marie. There was an older brother that died as an infant. It was Samuel. That was the firstborn of the four children. So there were only three surviving children. Um, as far as the family, um, I think Big Mama just instilled in everybody that God is first and then family is second. And that was the one thing that she always told us. And then, as a result, we did become a very close family throughout the years. Um, I don't know, anything else you want to know about the family?
So you said you lived with your grandmother. How many years did you live with your grandmother?
Um, I started school in Chickasha, so we lived with her then probably up through, oh gosh, there was a time we did move back to Oklahoma City, and I spent the fifth and sixth grades at Edwards Elementary School. And then it was after that, that's when Mama went to work at Langston. And that's when we moved back to Chickasha. And I did 3 grades there, seventh, eighth, and ninth. And then we came back to Oklahoma City, and that's when I started Douglas High School. So off and on. And I think all of us did. I remember my aunt and her children and family living off and on Big Mama. That was kind of what you did back then when if you needed help, within the family. So,
What was the community like when you were growing up? You talked a little bit about children being able to play, but can you talk about what the community was like, considering the fact that we were still in the midst of segregation?
at that time, everybody knew everybody because everybody lived on the same part of town. And there was everybody just knew everybody. They knew who you were. I can remember times when I would do something somewhere, and before I got home, my grandmother already knew it and was waiting for me at the front door. So, and it was just that way. I can remember my grandmother having me to take food to somebody because they needed somebody that maybe the mother was sick and couldn't cook, or my grandmother was one that had a telephone. People would come in to use the telephone, or we would get calls for certain people, and then I would have to go down and tell Miss So and so to come in and call whomever. We had, I think, on the area where we lived, I think we probably had the only storm cellar in that area because anytime there was severe weather, we would all go down in the storm cellar, and when we got there, you'd hear people beating on the door because they wanted to get in. No questions asked, just whoever showed up, you knew, everybody knew Mississippi had a storm cellar. And we often laugh about how we would go down, and my grandmother would can goods all the time, and that the storm cellar was where she kept them. She would put her jars down there, and we all had to be careful not to mess up her, knock them over or anything in the storm cellar. And then she kept big barrels outside for rainwater. I can't remember what else she did with the rainwater. I think sometimes you wash hair with rainwater, and I don't know what else she did with it. I can. Living with Big Mama, we got to experience also, uh, as most people did at that time, they ate what they grew, whether it be chickens or cows or hogs or whatever. There was not very much shopping done other than going to the store maybe to get a loaf of bread or some seasoning or something like that. My grandmother grew chickens and she would get them in the mail. She would order maybe 50 chickens and they would all come in the mail. Sometimes when some of them got there, they'd be dead and she'd have to throw them out. And she put them in what she called a little chicken house. And she kept a heater there for them until they grew big enough to get out on the chicken yard. They grew hogs. My daddy would butcher a hog every year. And that was a fun time for me because my mother would be, at that time you could get flour and goods like that in big old sacks. You probably heard of them. And they would use that fabric to make bags for the sausage. And I would run back and forth with the meat, taking it back and forth for them to do that. And my mother would be making the sausage bags, and my grandmother would be grinding, putting all the ingredients together, and then putting it through this little grinder, and then into the sausage bags. And gardens, whatever you grew in your garden, you canned. The food from the hog was frozen. She had a smokehouse where she kept her hams, and they were left out there to do whatever you do to smoke hams. Uh, and the rest of the community pretty much survived the same way. There was a lot of trading of vegetables and whatever. Somebody needed this. They would, Miss Sipuel, can I bring you some greens that I grow, and trade off things like that. It was a very close community, and I think probably that speaks for all black communities back in that era. There was one, and even in the black community, there was an area called Across the Tracks, and it was literally across the tracks. The train tracks separated, and it was an economic thing. The people on one side of the track, streets were pretty much concrete and better homes. Across the track was not as developed as the other side, and there would be mostly dirt roads and houses not built the same where they were on the other side of the track. But even at that, there was no ridicule of anyone because they lived on the other side of the track. Like as some people do these days, if you live in a certain area, you get ridiculed, the kids get ridiculed at school, but there was none of that. Everybody looked at each other as pretty much being equal. So.
Do you know what year it was? This was that you're talking about? Like,
The year for what?
What's the earliest year you can remember going back to?
I can remember going and enrolling in school in the first grade. And when I was enrolling, my mother let me give the lady the information, my name and my mother and father's name. And I told her, and I had the lady to write, my name is Charlene Warren Fisher. Warren is my daddy's name. And of course my mother, and she signed it. And all through school, I was known as Charlene Warren Fisher. And when I went to get my driver's license at age 16, and I looked at my birth certificate and it had Charlene Lois Fisher. And I told Mom, I said, Mom, they got a mistake on my driver's license. They got Charlene Lois Fisher on here and it's not my name. She said, no, that is your name. Your name is Charlene Lois Fisher. I said, well, She said, when you enrolled in the grade school, you told those people your name was Charlene Fisher. I said, well, why'd I do that? She said, you got mad at me one day and told me you weren't going to use my name anymore, that you were going to use your daddy's name, and that's what you did. I said, and you let me do it? She said, well, you got away with it. I didn't care. So I do remember that as far back as that, doing that. As far as any specific things that happened in those very early years, not a lot. Not a lot. I can remember the school, going to different classes where my classroom was and things like that, but nothing specific, you know.
What can you remember? Like, what experiences can you remember from school? Considering the fact that you said it was an all-black school, what was your experience like attending a segregated school?
Well, at that time, we didn't even know we were segregated. You know, like I tell people all the time, we didn't even know we were poor until we grew up and the white man told us we were poor. But teachers knew you, teachers knew your parents, so you knew to only do so much. However, if there were some teachers that you, just like now, if you felt you could get away with it, you would. And I can remember there was this one teacher named Mr. Roper, and we would always act crazy in his class. And he gave swats one day, and one day he gave me swats. I think it was maybe 2 swats or something. And oh, I started crying. And I ran out. I said, I'm going to tell my big mama. So I ran out of the building and ran across the street and told Big Mama. And so Big Mama went over and, you know, well, she took care of that. But she said she knew I wasn't hurt because she could had a chair that she could sit in and she could see the school. And she would sit there at lunchtime and watch me, you know, after school, see everything I was doing. And she said she happened to be sitting in a chair that day, and she saw me come out of the school, and she saw me crying, and she said the closer I got to the house, the louder I cried, you know. So she knew it wasn't, you know, but the fact that this man had hit this teenage girl with a board was what she was upset about, you know. Then I had another teacher named Mr. Doster, and we would act up in his class because he was very lenient. And I don't know, somehow he must have told my family about it because I walked in class one day and I didn't even see my daddy sitting in the back of the room. And I went in there in true form, just talking loud and crazy. And when I turned around and saw my daddy, I thought, oh my God. And, you know, that took care of that. So those are things that I can remember. And other, you know, there wasn't a lot of fighting or name calling. There were definitely no gangs. Everybody just, everybody was just in the same boat. You know, we were all just alike. There was no, even though some families were better economically than others, it wasn't any looking down on anybody, you know. So,
Can you tell me about your parents?
born in Ada Louis Fisher. Um, funny. Um, loved to travel. Enjoyed family. Every holiday there was a cookout. Sometimes we'd go out to the lake and we could take our friends with us. If not, there was something. My daddy loved to grill. He started out with one of those little bitty brown grills you see at Walmart, you know. And then eventually he got the big grill and would grill. Nobody ever tried to schedule anything on any holiday because we knew where we were supposed to be. We were supposed to be at Mama's house. They loved their grandchildren, would spoil them to death, and definitely loved each other. But they could be so funny sometimes. They could sit at that kitchen. Mama could be in the kitchen cooking, and Daddy, there was this little table right there in the kitchen area out of the dining room, and he would sit right there and read the paper. And they would get into the biggest arguments over, it might be something on the news, something totally out of, you know, anything that's going on that they're doing with them. And all they would argue back and forth, and you wouldn't get loud. And then when they got through, he'd say, "Come on, Lois, let's go to the store." And they were through, you know. So, and my daddy was really funny. He used profanity quite a bit, and but the grandkids all loved him dearly. Uh, I tell him, I said, "Seems like the more," and they called him Warren. He didn't want to be called Grandpa. Mama was called Mama Lois. They didn't want that Grandma, Grandpa, Granny thing, you know. So that was kind of unique for the kids. And Daddy would the grandkids, my boys in particular, he would taught them how to manicure a lawn. And when I say manicure, I mean everything from the mowing to the edging to the pulling of the weeds to, you know, spreading dirt, cow manure, everything to make his yard beautiful. Um, so they really loved him. Well, actually, they loved both of them because Mama would spoil them to death and didn't want me to ever whip them or anything. But I guess really just typical grandparents and probably a typical family. We take vacations in the summertime. Sometimes we go to Grand Canyon and sometimes California. Mostly they were out west vacations. And they would take, one year we took my grandmother, my mother's mother. Another year we took my daddy's father and stepmother on the vacation. And, um, and they were definitely, would definitely look out for the elderly. I can remember when my dad's father died, and he said, "Warren, I want you to promise me you'll take care of Rosie." That was his wife, and he promised him that. So then, when he died, we moved. We called her Mama Rosie. We moved. Bruce had to move into my bedroom and take his. She took his bedroom, and they kept her for years until she passed. And then when my grandmother, Big Mama, became ill, um, they moved her from Chickasha to Oklahoma City, and that she would, at the older she got, she would have problems holding herself until she got to the bathroom. So there was no fussing, no nothing. My daddy just got plastic and covered all the carpet from the bedroom to the bathroom, you know, so it would be easy to clean up. And of course, she eventually died of cancer. But Big Mama was my heart, though. I love my Big Mama.
Grew up with her.
Oh, yeah, yeah, that was my girl. Yeah.
And that was your mom's mom?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, her dad died. I was young. I have a picture with him. He was Big Daddy. But he died when I was very, very young. He was a Church of God in Christ, what they call a bishop, uh, Sipuel. And so I was raised in the Holiness Church with my grandmother. And of course, there was a church next door. So, you know, there's always church on Sunday and whatever else was going on,
Yeah.
you know. So it was fun.
How old were you when you became aware of civil rights activism happening throughout the community?
Probably, I didn't really become aware of civil rights until I was up in age, because I can remember the time when all of this was going on with Mama, but and the reason I remember is because I remember all of these different people coming to the house and talking and um, meetings and things at the house. And I can remember when my mother and her roommate, they needed money for the case, NAACP did. And so she and her roommate went on the road, and they went around to every small community in Oklahoma. They drove themselves. They went and spoke at churches, meetings, and people were giving dollars and $10 and whatever. And they raised something like $25,000 just doing that, because the case needed to be funded, you know. And we stayed. My mother's roommate had 2 children, so Big Mama kept all of us while they were doing that. Um, but I didn't really know what it was at the time.
How old were you during this time?
Shoot, I don't know, maybe elementary school, probably. And it must have been during the summertime because with Mildred and Roland staying with us, and I don't remember going to school during that time, so it had to be during the summer. But like I said, we didn't really, I had no idea what it was for.
Mm-hmm.
I was too young to understand, even if they told me.
So your mom was just integrating higher education and you were just a little
Just
elementary
going
kid.
on along with life, just playing and riding my bicycle. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's crazy.
But Mama did not really become, well, she was known, and this is why a lot of the small communities recognize her name because of what she did back then.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of it came down through generations about her from a lot of these little small towns. Of course, people like Mama and Martin Luther King and all of these people, eventually children are not going to know anything about them because it's been too far back, But I almost forgot my thought now. Shoot, I forgot what I was getting ready to say, girl. I thought it was important.
Well, we were just talking about your mom and her going to small towns, but her not really, did she not make a big deal about what she was doing? Like, it was just kind of like something?
No, it wasn't. And I never really knew anything about the threats and all of that until I got grown. No, there was nothing. And even as we grew up, there was nothing about like, y'all know what I did? Do y'all know that? There was none of that, Oh, I know what I was going to say. And she did not really become really well known to everybody until the civil rights movement came about. And that's when people started really recognizing what she had done. And then they started having her speaking at different engagements and going around to, then she was, I think Governor Boren did something, and then Governor Walters, I can't remember which one, put her on the Board of Regents at OU. But it was during that civil rights era that she really became well known. And that's why a lot of people, see, I'm older than Bruce, and during that time I was married and gone, and Bruce was still there, and that's why a lot of people know Bruce and don't know me, is because he would be driving her to the meetings and driving her around the state, and he and Daddy both. But that's when she really hit her peak, was during that time and after.
So I know you said you were in elementary when all of this was actually happening, but once you got older and started learning a little bit more about what your mom was doing, like, can you recall, like you mentioned some of the threats and things like that, like what types of threats would you receive?
Death threats, death phone calls. I haven't seen them, but it's been told that there were threats that came to the house, I think in her book, she might have mentioned it in one of those books somewhere, somebody mentioned it. And as a matter of fact, I think that's when I first found out about it. And probably Bruce, and then I learned a lot when she was writing her autobiography. I learned a lot at that time because it was just something we never discussed. And Mama was just Mama, making popcorn balls and snow ice cream and all of that, there was just nothing special. She didn't make it anything special, I'll put it that way. Yeah.
Why do you think she didn't make it anything special?
I think that was just her. It was something she did. She wasn't a braggadocious type person. Whatever she did, and she believed in whatever she did. And probably as we were younger, I was just too young for her to be trying to explain all of that to me. It'd probably have been frightening, and I'm sure that's not something that she or Big Mama or my daddy wanted to do.
Yeah.
That was just her.
Do you think your mom would accept the label of an activist?
Probably.
Yeah. Do you know a little bit about what maybe led her to make this decision? So when I read about her, I mean, I read about the fact that at Langston, when she was majoring in English, she always wanted to be a lawyer. And they tried to create a Langston law school, but she refused. So do you know anything about why she held her ground and said, no, I want to go to OU's law school, period. Like, I'm not going out of state. I'm not going to Langston's. I want this.
Okay, well, she took this role because when the NAACP was looking, they were trying to integrate places, and they targeted OU, but they needed someone that they felt could really go there and do well and get a degree. And they wanted my uncle, Lemuel, uh, and he was actually, my mother's the smartest person I've ever known, and my uncle was really smarter than she was. So they wanted him, but he had just come back from World War II, and he didn't want to do that. He wanted to go to Howard University, and he didn't want to get involved. He said he had had enough discrimination during the war, and he just couldn't. He just couldn't. He didn't want to do it. So Mama said that she would, and so that's how she ended up in that, uh, taking that role. And he went on to get his law degree at Howard University. So he did complete his degree. Um, as far as not going to the school here at the Capitol that they created, she knew from just listening to her talk, she knew that that was not equal education, first of all. And that was not going to serve the purpose of integrating the OU School of Law. And Bruce can really explain that part better than I can, but I do know that that was her basis for it. And and we all know that that was just a sham. You know, two lawyers, two teachers were going to teach law for a law degree. You know, um, and so she chose the OU even though she knew was what she was going to be faced with. Not sure you read about all the discrimination things and putting her behind the chain and all of that. You know.
Yeah. I actually went and visited OU, and they took me to the exact place that they would sit her behind the chain. I mean, it's remodeled now, but they took us into that little like space where where she had to sit.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, that's.
And in the cafeteria, I think they had a little place for her.
Yeah.
In there as well. And then it got to the point that some of the law students would go and sit behind the chain with her and help her, you know. And I think she might not have enrolled on the first day of school, but after she got there, the students started giving her the notes and things to catch up with where they were. And
wow.
So that was, you know, kind of profound that the students really helped with that process. And of course, I'm sure you know that George Cross, the president at the time, was really in her favor. He really was for her. And when they went to enroll, he told her, and Roscoe Dungy and the others that were with him, that you know, if he could, he would. But the law said that he couldn't do it. So they said, well, all we want you to do is put that in writing, stating that it's not her credentials. She has everything she needs to enroll, but the fact that I cannot enroll her because of what the law says. So that was the basis that why I got to the Supreme Court, because they wanted to break down, because the law was unequal.
Right.
Yeah.
So when I read it, was like there was no academic basis for denying her outside of just race. And the law was like the law was such that it carried a fine that teachers who taught mixed race classes would have to pay a fine, and then students who sat in those classes had to pay a fine. So it was like monetized, like.
And there were some people that would, if they wanted to get a higher degree, they would go out of state to get it.
Yeah, and I read Oklahoma would pay for that, but it was pennies compared to what out-of-state tuition costs.
Exactly.
And black people ended up having to raise money anyway, so it was almost like black folks were like paying a surplus for segregation because they were having to pay for it anyway.
Yep, they wanted to keep us ignorant,
Yeah,
because, they didn't even want to teach us how to read back in the day,
right,
so.
right. Wow. Can you talk about your mom's role as a teacher? So she ended up teaching at Langston University. Do you know about like her teaching or?
The only thing I know, or that I can remember, is I never had a class under her. She always arranged where I wouldn't have that, because she said she didn't want to flunk me. But anyway, she was known as a very, very good teacher. She was known as a strict teacher. Um, Anybody that I have ever talked with that had a class under her talks about the kind of teacher that she was, how knowledgeable she was, uh, how strict she was in her classroom, but it was fair. So basically, and she was at Langston for, oh my God, I don't know how many years, and she commuted every day. If the weather was, after Daddy retired, if the weather was bad, he would take her up there and bring her back. I don't ever remember ever even spending a night on campus. So whatever the weather was, uh, she was there, and that was during the days. I don't know if when you went there, for Highway 33, was Highway 33 still there? The road that
Oh
winds.
yeah,
Okay.
the really dangerous one.
Yeah, so you know how dangerous that was, and especially during bad weather. Um, so she still did, well, dedicated is all I can say. Dedicated, fair, knowledgeable. That's what I can gather from everything that I've heard from students that have had her class. And even when I was there, students say, "Oh, girl, your mama's killing me. She's killing me." But they would do whatever needed to be done. And when they left, they knew whatever uh, subject matter they needed from that class.
What did she teach?
I don't even know. Maybe some government classes, because she was in the history department.
Okay.
And I don't know what her lineup was of which classes, or even what. I think she mostly had, I believe, upperclassmen. Uh, I can't remember any lower class freshmen or anything. I think she might have had maybe juniors and seniors or something.
Okay. So, would you say that your mother's role in the movement had any impact on your family or family life?
As we were growing up, no. No, that was altogether separate. And actually, by the time we were really growing up, that part was done over. When we were growing up, she was going to OU to get a master's, I think, I don't know how many, in something. I don't remember, some kind of history, something. And I think that was because of what she was teaching. So she already had a law degree, but she went back and got a master's in something. And then I think she went back and got further study in something else in the history area. But I can remember her doing research on the Trail of Tears, the Indian movement, and however that relates to whatever she did, I don't know. And I remember that because I would be her typist, I would type up her. And oh my God, when she gave you something to type, those yellow huge steno pads, have you seen those that they used to have? Okay, she would write, it would always be in longhand. She would write something out. And if she wanted to include something, it might be on another piece of paper, and it would be taped right here. And then she would forget something else, and then she would get a straight pen, and then she would tack that in down here. And then on further down, there would be some scribble, and she would scribble that out, and then tape that in. It was the biggest, and then she would number it: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It was just so crazy. But the way she would give you things to type, nobody else would have been able to do it, because you'd have to really follow her. Because sometimes I was like, "This is what you mean right here," But it was. That's what I would go through and type in her papers for, and her notes,
Yeah. What's something you want people to know or remember about your mom?
That she was a very compassionate, intelligent woman that cared about family, definitely her race, and I'm trying to think, how can I put fairness or equal or people not being mistreated? Um, I guess that's about that. Some that I love. Well, I said family oriented, very family oriented. Um, yeah, that's about it because we probably did as family everything that other families normally do that did not have that kind of whose parents were did like her went through things like she did, but it didn't seem to really affect her as a person uh, as far as her ego or when people tell you nigger and call you all these names and all that you have to go through, um, that didn't affect her life later on, if that we could tell. She was just mama. So, and I'm sure you've heard about the sundown law.
Yes.
Okay, so I don't need to explain that. Yeah, but it was funny. And I didn't know about that either until I got older, about the sundown. But I tell you what I do remember also is when she was going to school, all I knew was she was going to school. And I didn't relate it until I got older. But I can remember on Saturdays, they had, I believe it was a Chevy, and it was a two-tone cream and brown. And I can remember on weekends, my daddy would be out there working on that car. He would get a mechanic's book. He had a mechanic's book. And that's just the way he was. He was very strict on, directions and all of this kind of stuff. But he would, whatever was wrong with that car, if it was something, if you could hear a noise, or if the oil needed changing, or if the carburetor, or what are those little things they used to put in the cars? Little white things. And you all don't know about that now. Spark plugs.
Oh, okay.
Spark plugs. Uh, he could tell, he'd try to see which one was bad and all that kind of stuff and make sure the tires were right. I can remember him keeping that car in shape for her to go to school. But like I said, I couldn't put it together then. But as I look back on those times and remember him out there working on that car, then I know that that's what he was doing because they had to drive down every day to OU, to class.
And with the sundown law looming, was it just really important to make sure she wasn't?
Exactly. He didn't want her to get caught there after dark.
Right. That's love.
Yep. Oh, yeah. He loved her. I tell you, they could argue like, oh, God, like two people on the street ready to fight, but that was it. When they were through, they were through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lastly, do you think your mom's work has impacted education today?
Yes, I do. And I see that when I go to OU or when I talk to people that are in law school or have gone to law school at OU, and they're thanking me, for what she did. And of course, I can get no recognition. I mean, I can't get, it's all of it goes to her. But they let me know that they know that had it not been for her and doing what she did, they probably would not have had the opportunity to get their education there and the quality education that they want there. And OU has been pretty good lately about recognizing her and putting things in place for everybody to know what she did, and even what the role that OU played. That how it wasn't equal.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I can tell you right now, when I listen to Clara Luper's interview, when she talks about her good friend Ada Louis or Nancy Davis say that it was Ada Louis who pushed her and urged her to go to OSU. So even then, like, people still paid homage to
Now, if you want to really hear somebody talk about it, you ought to talk to Anita Hill.
Anita Hill or Arnold?
Hill.
Okay.
Anita Hill was she doesn't live here though. Anita Hill was the lady that Clarence Thomas, the Supreme Court judge.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. She always speaks of Mama and how encouraging she was to her during those days. And she talks about how Mama would maybe write her a note, of encouragement. And when she would see her, and I can't remember, there was a quote she always gave that Mama said to her one time, but I can't remember what it was now. But she can go on and on about her respect for Mama and how she helped her through those times when she was going through that ordeal with Clarence Thomas.
Mm-hmm.
So, and she's a very good speaker too.
That makes sense why she spoke. She was the keynote speaker for the Ada Louis Sipuel Fisher Center of Social Justice and USAO.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense why she was the keynote for that
Mm-hmm.
gala. I'm going there on Wednesday.
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
okay.
Dr. Tanya Anderson.
Anderson, yeah.
Yeah, I've reached out to her, so Wednesday I'm going to go visit the center and talk to her a little bit.
Oh, well, while you're there, you ought to get her to show you Lincoln High School. That's the school. It's, I think now it's a middle school or something. But they've renovated it but even in Chickasha, I'll have to say this, but that little small town, as I've traveled around the state and seen where other people, my colleagues, Langston and stuff, went to school and people I work with, their schools were just not, in Chickasha, they built a 2-story brick building with an auditorium, and it served as a basketball court as well. And then on the side, there were classrooms for elementary students, and there was they taught automotives and woodwork in that school. And that's something that a lot of black schools did not do back in that time. Mm-hmm. And now the equipment that we got, anytime we got new textbooks, they were the ones from the white school, because the white school got the current adoption. So we ended up with their typewriters. We getting new typewriters. Well, they would come from Chickasha High School,
mm-hmm.
From where the white students were. And even on the cemetery there, which you'll probably see when you go out to OCU, well, that's not the right name, but whatever. There's a section for blacks, but it is kept up by the people in the cemetery. And it's mowed, it's, everything. And I've gone to cemeteries with friends in small towns, and it's weeds, sometimes just you can't hardly find it. Mm-hmm. And they have to really look for the grave, that they're looking for. But things like that told me that, we really did have it better. Not my family, but blacks in Chickasha had it better than a lot of other little towns around the state. Mm-hmm. But if you see Chickasha High School, and if you look across the street on First Street, that's where we lived. We lived on that corner diagonal of the high school.
Chickasha High School?
Mm-hmm. Okay. 601 South First Street. And my grandmother owned about probably half of that block, because the property that the church was on was hers. There was her house, and then there was another house that she kept as a rent house next to hers. So she was kind of and then I'm told that at one time she had a little store there. I didn't know that. Bruce and I didn't even know that till somebody dug it up from somewhere and found out. Yeah. So she was kind of an entrepreneur in her own right, Yeah, Big Mama was a mess, though.
Awesome. Well, is there anything else that you want to add or include?
Well, probably when I leave here, I'll think of something that I probably should have told you. But I can say this, and it's not that important, but one of the things that always impressed me with Mama was how well she knew the Bible. Mm-hmm. She could quote that Bible verbatim, chapter, verse, everything. And she didn't do it often. But, and I'll tell you when I really realized my Mama was smart. I was doing a crypto quote. You ever do those?
Mm-mm.
Okay. Well, you know what they are, right?
Yeah.
Okay, well, they come in the newspaper. And I was working on this crypto quote, and I couldn't get a word. It was going to, and I can't remember what, it was a quote, some famous quote by somebody. And I said, Mama, you know how to do crypto quotes? Yeah. I didn't even know she knew how to do crypto quotes. Okay, I thought I was really doing something smart. And so I'm trying to get this one word. And she said, well, Rick, tell me what you have so far. So I told her what I had. And she just went through the whole quote. Just, and I said, how'd you know that? She said, well, I just knew it, And I thought, and that's when it hit me. She's really smart, on a crypto quote, Not thinking about law school or anything,
Right.
but to me, a crypto quote told me how intelligent she was,
Forget the jury stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but
Awesome.
I guess, I don't know, unless you can think of something else that you might want to know.
Really, I just, context, like who she was as a woman, as a mother, like outside of just the case. So.
I don't think there's anybody right now living that would know her even as a friend. The one person that probably knew her better than anyone was her roommate. They became friends when they became roommates at Langston. You know how you can just get a roommate and you don't know who it is. And they developed a lifelong friendship, and they called each other mate because they said they used to call each other roommate, but then they just finally dropped the room and just called each other mate. And I was, I guess, in high school before I knew mate's real name. Because we just called her mate, and I was doing my graduation announcements, and I wrote on there mate, and I put her address, and Mama said, who is this to? I said, this is mate. She said, that's not her name. I said, well, what is her name? So that was, but they loved each other. They loved each other, and they were very, very close, very close. She could probably tell you some things that, and she had some other close friends, but most of them that I can remember are gone. Because I can't remember. I don't know what she would be now. 1924? How old would she be now? About 90 something?
Yeah, she was born in 24.
Uh-huh, yeah. So,
yeah.
If they're alive, they probably don't remember.
Yeah.
They probably got dementia or something.
I wish. That would be awesome.
Yeah, so what all did Bruce tell you?
Well, before we end, is there anything else I'm about to turn this off?
Oh, not that I can think of.
Okay.